It was supposed to be a year of growth, a time of expansion and prosperity for Evergreen Technologies. The company had been on an upward trajectory for years, boasting innovative products, a thriving customer base, and a team that was tightly knit, fueled by the vision of its charismatic CEO, Thomas Whelan. To everyone on the outside, it appeared that Evergreen Technologies was on the verge of greatness. But all that glitters is not gold. Beneath the polished facade of success, dark whispers began to stir within the company's walls. There were murmurs of strange discrepancies in the financial statements, employees speaking of unexplained changes in the company's budget, and sudden departures of key staff. But no one could put their finger on exactly what was wrong, until it was too late. On the morning of January 15th, everything came crashing down. It started with a call to the CFO, Claire Matthews, who was at her desk in the early hours, reviewing the company's year-end financials. Her eyes widened as she ran through the numbers once more, an error so large that it made her stomach churn. The company was in the red, deep in debt, with millions unaccounted for. The issue wasn't just a small oversight, it was deliberate. Someone had been stealing from Evergreen Technologies, and now the truth was coming to light. Claire immediately called for an emergency meeting with Thomas Whelan. As she sat across from him in his spacious office, her heart raced, knowing that this moment could change everything. "Thomas, we've got a problem," she said, her voice trembling. "The numbers, they don't add up. Someone's been embezzling funds for months, possibly years. We've lost millions." Thomas, normally calm and collected, turned pale. His hand gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. He was speechless, staring at Claire with a mix of disbelief and anger. It was impossible. He trusted his team. He trusted Claire. But who? He managed to choke out. Who would do this? Claire didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing for sure. Whoever had done this was close, someone who knew the company inside and out. They had access to the finances, the company's bank accounts, and the sensitive data that no one else could touch. Thomas's mind began to race. How could this happen under his watch? Who could he trust? The questions piled on top of each other, suffocating him. But it wasn't just the money that was at stake. It was the reputation of the company, the people who depended on it, and the future of everyone involved. In the days that followed, Claire and a team of forensic accountants began their investigation. They dug through months of financial records, meticulously examining every transaction, every invoice, every withdrawal. The results were nothing short of shocking. The theft had been methodical, a slow, insidious erosion of the company's funds. Over the course of several months, the embezzler had siphoned off millions, hiding the thefts under layers of false reports and manipulated spreadsheets. It was almost as if they had known exactly how to cover their tracks, leaving behind just enough confusion to throw anyone off the scent. And then, just when they thought they were getting closer to finding the culprit, they discovered something that made Claire's blood run cold. The thief had access to more than just the finances. They had been tapping into sensitive client data, manipulating contracts, and funneling money into offshore accounts. Claire's hands trembled as she stared at the evidence in front of her. There was only one person who could have orchestrated such a complex scheme, someone who knew the ins and outs of the company, someone who could hide in plain sight. Thomas. But no, that couldn't be right. Thomas was the CEO, the man who had built this company from the ground up. He was a visionary, a man of integrity. Could he really be involved in something so dark? As Claire continued to dig deeper into the financials, she uncovered something even more disturbing. The thief wasn't just one person. It was a network, an inside job involving multiple key employees who had been working together to siphon off the company's resources. But one name stood out above all others: Ryan Marshall. Ryan had been the company's trusted vice president of operations, a position of immense power and influence. He had worked alongside Thomas for years, and they had become close friends. They had shared business plans, personal victories, and even failures. Ryan was more than just a colleague, he was family. But now, Claire was looking at Ryan's name on the list of people involved in the embezzlement scheme. She couldn't believe it. How could Ryan, a man who had once been so loyal to Thomas, betray him so utterly? As the days passed, the investigation revealed even more shocking details. Ryan had been using his position to funnel money into shell companies, disguising the thefts as legitimate business expenses. He had convinced other employees to help him, using their fear of losing their jobs or their loyalty to Thomas as leverage. The betrayal ran deep, and Claire felt the weight of the deception crushing her. It wasn't just the money that had been stolen, it was trust, it was loyalty, it was everything that Evergreen Technologies had stood for. When Claire finally confronted Ryan, it was in a quiet, secluded office, far from prying eyes. She had gathered all the evidence she needed, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. Ryan, normally a confident and charming man, seemed broken. His once sharp eyes now appeared dull, his posture slumped as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. "You didn't have to do this, Ryan," Claire said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. "Why? Why would you betray Thomas like this?" Ryan's face twisted with a mix of shame and regret. "I didn't have a choice, Claire. I was in too deep. They were threatening me, my family. I couldn't get out." Claire's heart sank as she realized the true extent of Ryan's involvement. He wasn't the mastermind. He was just another pawn in a much bigger game. But that didn't make his betrayal any less painful. The company that Thomas had built from the ground up was now on the verge of collapse, and Ryan had played a pivotal role in its destruction. "I trusted you," Claire whispered, the weight of her words hitting both of them. "I trusted you with everything." Ryan looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this. I never wanted to hurt anyone." But it was too late for apologies. The damage had been done. As the investigation continued, the full scale of the theft became apparent. It wasn't just Ryan. There were other key figures involved, employees who had long been trusted by Thomas, who had shared his vision, who had helped him lead the company to the heights of success. They had all been part of the scheme, working together to bring down Evergreen Technologies from the inside out. The media caught wind of the scandal, and soon, Evergreen Technologies found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare. The company's stock plummeted, clients began pulling out, and investors started backing away. What had once been a shining beacon of innovation now seemed like a sinking ship. The walls of Evergreen Technologies began to close in on Thomas. His once loyal employees turned on him, some even accusing him of being complicit in the thefts, despite his innocence. The truth was more complicated, more sinister. It was as if the company was cursed, the very foundation built on lies and betrayal. But just when everyone thought the worst was over, A shocking revelation rocked the company to its core. Thomas had never been as innocent as everyone had believed. It wasn't just Ryan or the other employees who had been betraying the company. Thomas had known about the thefts all along. He had allowed it to happen. He had turned a blind eye to the signs, choosing to prioritize profit and success over the people who had built the company with him. The twist was revealed in a shocking confession made by Claire herself. She had uncovered an email trail, hidden in the company's archives, that revealed Thomas's involvement in the scheme. He had been complicit in covering up the thefts, turning a blind eye to the signs and allowing his trusted employees to take the fall. It was then that Claire realized the truth. She had been duped by Thomas just as much as everyone else. The company's future now hung in the balance. The truth had come to light, but it was too late for redemption. Evergreen Technologies was teetering on the edge of destruction, and no one knew who to trust anymore. With Thomas's role in the scandal now exposed, the question remained: would he face justice, or would he manage to escape with his life and reputation intact? As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Claire was left standing at the crossroads of betrayal and truth, unsure of what would come next. Who could she trust now? And what was Thomas's next move? Evergreen Technologies had once been a shining beacon of success in the tech industry. From its humble beginnings as a startup in the heart of Silicon Valley, it grew to be a multi-million-dollar company, revolutionizing the way businesses interacted with technology. But behind closed doors, the empire was beginning to crumble. Thomas Whelan, the charismatic CEO who had built the company from scratch, was oblivious to the storm brewing within. He spent his days in high-stakes meetings with investors, presenting the company's future vision, while his employees, those closest to him, slowly tore the company apart from the inside. But everything changed on the morning of January 15th, when Claire Matthews, the company's chief financial officer, discovered something she never expected: a massive financial discrepancy, millions of dollars missing from Evergreen's accounts. A theft so grand, it seemed impossible for anyone to escape its consequences. Claire couldn't breathe. Her eyes scanned the spreadsheet over and over again, each time hoping that the numbers would somehow align, that this could be a mistake. But no, there it was, staring her in the face. Millions of dollars gone, unaccounted for, with no trace left behind. The most chilling part? It was happening under her watch. She had worked tirelessly with Thomas to ensure the company ran like a well-oiled machine. She trusted her team. She trusted her instincts. So how could this have happened? Her hands trembled as she dialed Thomas's number, barely able to speak when he answered. "Thomas, we've got a problem," she whispered, trying to steady herself. "The numbers, they don't add up. There's millions missing, and I don't know where it's gone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What are you saying, Claire?" Thomas's voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and concern. "I'm saying someone's been stealing from the company. Someone who had access to everything. We need to look into this immediately." The weight of her words hung in the air. Claire was a woman of integrity, and to accuse anyone of such a crime, especially within the company she helped build, was more than just uncomfortable. It was personal. Claire knew it wouldn't be easy, but she dove straight into the investigation. She called in a team of forensic accountants, diving headfirst into the company's financial records. But with every file they uncovered, more questions emerged. The theft wasn't just a one-time slip-up. It was a series of orchestrated moves, hidden behind layers of fraudulent reports and manipulated numbers. They began with the obvious, looking into the transactions, the bank statements, the wire transfers. But as the days wore on, it became clear that the theft was much deeper than they originally thought. Someone had been planting false reports, making fake invoices, and even altering the payroll. The scale of the fraud was staggering, and Claire couldn't help but wonder how it had gone unnoticed for so long. The more they dug, the more sinister it seemed. And then, a breakthrough, a pattern. The thief had been carefully funneling money into offshore accounts. But what shocked Claire the most was that the transfers were authorized by someone very close to her, Ryan Marshall. Ryan, the vice president of operations, had been one of Thomas's most trusted allies. They'd worked side by side for years, growing Evergreen Technologies into the powerhouse it was. But now, Claire saw his name on the list of people who had authorized the fraudulent transfers. It didn't make sense. Ryan had always been the loyal, reliable one. How could he betray the company? Claire's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to confront Ryan. She couldn't fathom that someone she had trusted so deeply could be behind the embezzlement. But the evidence was undeniable, and she knew she had no choice but to face him. She met Ryan in his office, where he greeted her with his usual smile, as if nothing was amiss. His confidence seemed unnerving now, like a mask he wore to hide the truth. "Ryan, we need to talk," Claire said, her voice cold and controlled. He raised an eyebrow, his smile faltering. "What's going on?" "It's you," Claire said, pointing to the documents in front of her. "You've been funneling money out of the company. We have the proof." Ryan's face turned pale as he saw the evidence spread out on the table before him. His confidence crumbled, and for a moment he looked like a man who had been caught in a trap of his own making. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Claire snapped, leaning forward. "You've been stealing from the company, Ryan. You've been stealing from all of us." Ryan collapsed into his chair, his hands shaking. "I had no choice, Claire. You don't understand. They were going to kill my family if I didn't do it." Claire was stunned. "Who? Who were you working for?" Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't have a choice. They had my wife, my kids. I had to do it. I didn't want to hurt anyone, especially Thomas." Claire felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Ryan hadn't been working alone. There were others involved, others pulling the strings from behind the scenes. But before she could ask more questions, Ryan spoke again, his voice trembling. "It's not just me. Thomas, he knew." Claire froze. "What do you mean, Thomas knew?" Ryan's face twisted with guilt. "He knew about the money. He's been taking his share. He's been part of it from the beginning." Ryan's confession left Claire reeling. She couldn't believe it. How could Thomas, her friend, her mentor, be involved in the fraud? He had built this company. He had given them all the opportunity to succeed. And yet, here she was, learning that the man she had trusted most had been complicit in destroying everything they had worked for. Claire immediately called for an emergency meeting with Thomas. The room was heavy with tension as Claire confronted him with the evidence. But Thomas's reaction was not what she expected. He didn't deny it. Instead, He looked at Claire with a resigned expression, as if he had been waiting for this moment to come. "I'm sorry, Claire," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted you to find out this way, but the truth is, I've been complicit. I've been taking the money, too." Claire was stunned. "How could you, Thomas? You built this company. You said we were a family." Thomas's eyes flickered with regret. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. It got out of hand. The money, it wasn't just for me. It was for the future of the company. I thought I could fix things, but by the time I realized I couldn't, it was too late." The revelation that Thomas had been involved in the theft sent shockwaves through the company. Employees who had once looked up to him now felt betrayed. The trust they had placed in him was shattered, and with it, the foundation of Evergreen Technologies began to crumble. As news of the scandal spread, the media pounced on the story, sensationalizing every detail. Investors pulled their money, clients pulled their contracts, and the company's stock price plummeted. The damage was irreparable. For Thomas, the walls were closing in. He had built this empire, but now it was being torn down by the very hands that had helped him raise it. Claire, once a loyal ally, was now caught in the storm, torn between the man who had mentored her and the truth that could no longer be ignored. Just when it seemed like there was no hope left, a new twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. A mysterious figure from Thomas's past appeared, an old business partner, someone he had worked with long before Evergreen Technologies was founded. This person, who had remained in the shadows for years, had been the mastermind behind the entire scheme. And now, this person was ready to expose everything. The question remained, would they take down Thomas with them, or would they try to use him to cover their own tracks? As the investigation continued, Claire realized that the true depth of the betrayal had yet to be uncovered. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Claire sat in her office, poring over the final pieces of evidence, she received a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was familiar, but the words they spoke were a chilling reminder of how far the corruption had spread. "I know everything, Claire," the voice said, "and I'm not done yet." The air in Evergreen Technologies had grown thick with uncertainty. The walls of the once prosperous company now felt like a suffocating prison. Claire Matthews, the company's chief financial officer, sat at her desk late one evening, reviewing the final pieces of evidence. Her heart pounded in her chest as the realization set in. They were almost there. The criminals who had brought this company to its knees were about to be exposed. Every secret, every betrayal, every ounce of greed. The company, which had once been a symbol of innovation and success, was now a shadow of its former self. Employees had fled, investors had pulled their funding, and the stock price had plummeted to a fraction of its original value. The scandal had not only shaken the company's foundations, but it had destroyed the lives of those involved. Claire glanced at the clock. Midnight. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan Marshall, the vice president of operations, and the man who had once been her trusted colleague. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "I know who's behind it all," the message read. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m. You'll understand everything." Her breath caught in her throat. Ryan had been one of the first to betray Thomas Whelan, the CEO, and now he was claiming to know more. Claire had to know the truth. She couldn't let this company fall any further into the abyss. The next day, Claire arrived at the appointed meeting spot, a quiet cafe just outside the city. The air was crisp, and the wind tugged at her coat as she walked inside. Ryan was already there, sitting at a corner booth. His face was drawn and pale, a far cry from the confident man she had once known. When he saw her approach, he stood up, his eyes flickering with something like guilt, but also determination. "Claire, you need to listen to me," Ryan said, his voice hoarse. "I've been part of something much bigger than I ever realized. But it wasn't just Thomas who betrayed you. There's more to the story. Someone else is pulling the strings." Claire's mind raced. Who? Ryan? Who's behind this? Ryan leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's not just us. It's someone from Thomas's past. Someone who had always been in the shadows. Someone who never wanted the company to succeed. That person was Thomas's first business partner, Victor Gray." Claire felt the room spin as Ryan's words hit her like a thunderclap. Victor Gray. The name echoed in her mind, dredging up memories she'd long buried. Thomas and Victor had been inseparable once, before Evergreen Technologies had even been a dream. But when they split ways, no one ever really knew why. Victor had disappeared from their lives, and now it was clear he had never really left. "He's been orchestrating everything," Ryan continued. "He set up the offshore accounts, manipulated the financial records, and planted the idea of embezzling in Thomas's mind. It was never just about the money, it was about control. Victor wanted to destroy Thomas's success. He wanted to take it all." Claire sat back in her seat, stunned. Her mind raced with the implications of Ryan's revelation. If Victor Gray was behind the theft, it meant that the corruption was much deeper than she had ever imagined. Thomas, the man who had trusted her with everything, had been manipulated, dragged into a conspiracy that he couldn't escape. But what hurt the most was the realization that she had been blind to it all. She had trusted Ryan, trusted Thomas, and now she was left questioning everything. The next few days were a blur of frantic calls, sleepless nights, and the discovery of even more sinister truths. Claire and Ryan worked together, digging into Victor Gray's past, uncovering his web of deceit, and following the trail of money that had led back to him. As they pieced together the story, it became clear Victor had been playing a long game, biding his time until he could strike at the heart of the company that had once been his. Victor had been quietly siphoning funds from Evergreen Technologies for years, and his plan had been to tear the company apart from the inside out. He had carefully planted seeds of doubt in Thomas's mind, feeding his insecurities until he had convinced him to overlook the financial discrepancies. It had been Victor who had planted the idea of making risky investments, pulling strings behind the scenes, and using the company's resources for his own gain. Claire's gut twisted with anger. Thomas had been manipulated, but he had also been complicit. He had allowed Victor into his life, into his company, and now they were both paying the price. Victor, however, was elusive. His trail was cold, and every lead they followed turned up empty. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. Claire began to fear the worst, that Victor had planned it all, knowing that the moment the truth came out, he would disappear without a trace. But Claire refused to give up. She knew she had to find him before he disappeared for good, taking the last remnants of Evergreen Technologies with him. Just when Claire thought the hunt had come to a standstill, she received a tip-off from an unexpected source, an anonymous email that contained a cryptic message. It was a location, a rundown building on the outskirts of the city, and a time, 10 p.m. Claire didn't hesitate. She contacted the authorities and led them to the location, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She couldn't shake the feeling that this would be the moment when everything would finally be revealed. As they entered the building, Claire's heart skipped a beat. There, standing in front of them, was Victor Gray. He was calm, almost smug, as if he had been expecting them. "You've been looking for me, haven't you?" Victor said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You've come all this way, only to find that you're too late." Claire took a step forward. "It's over, Victor. You've destroyed everything. You've manipulated Thomas, stolen millions, and ruined this company. It ends now." Victor smirked. "You think you've won? The truth is, you were always part of the plan. I knew you would figure it out eventually. But you're too late. I'm untouchable. This building? It's my insurance policy. Even if you expose me, I'll be gone before anyone knows what happened." But just as he spoke, Claire felt a surge of hope. She had been preparing for this moment. The authorities were already outside, ready to take him down. His arrogance was his downfall. "You're not untouchable, Victor," Claire said, her voice steady. "You may have thought you had control, but you've underestimated one thing: justice." With a flash of blue and red lights, the police swarmed the building, arresting Victor and his accomplices. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Claire felt a rush of relief, mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The media erupted with the news of Victor Gray's arrest and the exposure of his elaborate scheme to bring down Evergreen Technologies. The company's story became a cautionary tale of betrayal, greed, and the lengths people would go to for power. But for Claire, the story was far from over. Thomas Whelan, once a proud CEO, was forced to face the consequences of his actions. He was tried for his role in the conspiracy and, though he claimed he had been manipulated, the jury found him guilty of neglecting his duties and turning a blind eye to the fraud. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, but it wasn't the prison sentence that hurt the most, it was the destruction of the legacy he had built. Evergreen Technologies was no more. The company was dismantled, its assets sold off, and the employees left to pick up the pieces of their shattered careers. Claire was one of the few who managed to rebuild, finding solace in knowing that justice had been served. The echoes of Evergreen Technologies' fall would never fully fade, but for Claire, it was the beginning of a new chapter. The lessons learned from the scandal would shape her future. She had seen the darkest sides of human nature, but she had also witnessed the power of truth and justice. In the end, the culprits were brought to light, and though the company was lost, the truth remained. Victor Gray may have thought he was untouchable, but in the end, it was justice that triumphed. Justice was served, and the company's future was now in the hands of those who believed in doing the right thing. If you found this story gripping and want to hear more about cases that uncover the truth, be sure to like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's dive into more stories of betrayal, redemption, and justice in the episodes to come. Stay tuned.